Hey guys, I want to show you today how to make templates in QlikView that are similar to what you'll see on QlikView's demo site that come from their best practices team. They tend to use these backgrounds with these abstract patterns that are real faded out, and sometimes they add these accent colors and things like that. And also within their pages, they use a lot of gradients and shadows to create separation between different areas. It's a nice approach to do that. It's real minimalist, has a minimal effect, but does the job very well. For example, here they separate the header from the rest of the page using this shadow right here. So you may think you need Illustrator or Photoshop or some photo editing software like that to create these kind of effects, but actually we can do it pretty quickly with just QlikView Desktop and a screen grabber. So I'm going to show you how to do that. The first thing we need to do is get our background image. So I just went to Google and I searched abstract background, and I put gray because I want to start with a neutral color in the search bar and look through some different images, and I ended up going with this image right here because it's pretty faded already. It's a simple, nice pattern. So we're going to save this image down. I'm going to call it starting image, and now we're going to move to QlikView. So I'm going to start a new QlikView document and go into the properties and set that image as the background. When you set the image, you want to make sure that the image is not being stretched, and you want it to appear in the top left corner. So I'll change that vertical setting to top left. The other thing we want to do is I typically like to set the color, or make sure, just in case the document default changes. So in this case, it's worth noting that the document default is this gray 248, because now that we have this nice image, which looks pretty good, one problem we're going to have is if someone uses this application on a bigger screen and the image does not fit the entire screen. What you're going to have is these edges are going to not blend well with that gray background. So we're going to need to fade the edges. Another thing I'm going to show you how to do is to add that accent color. So we're going to start with the accent color first, only because it's going to go below those fades, so it's easier to do that way. So what you're going to do is create a new text object and set it to the color of your accent. I'm going to use a shade of green that I like. So this is a pretty neutral-ish green here. I have my settings on advanced because I'm going to need to get to these borders and shadow settings later. But you may be able to accomplish these same effects with plain styling or simple styling. I'm not sure what that mode is called. So I've got my green object here, and now I want to put it in the top left corner. And I'm going to cover the whole view with it. But I want that pattern to come through, so now I'm going to go back into the settings. And by the way, make sure you leave some room down here for when we use those fades later. And we're going to take that color and we're going to make it, well, you could make it transparent if you just wanted the whole thing to be green. You can see kind of the effect of that, where you can see these patterns here. But what I really want to do is I want it to fade into that transparency so that it's darker in this top left corner, similar to what we saw on that first demo. So I'm going to use a 2-color gradient here. And for the second color, I'm going to use the ARGB function. And what the ARGB function does is it takes in for the first parameter an alpha value that controls how transparent the object is. And 0 means it's not transparent at all. 255 is the max. I'm sorry, I have that backwards. 0 means that it is completely transparent, and 255 means that it is not transparent at all. So we're going to keep it at 0 because we want it to fade completely out. We also want it to fade from left corner to bottom right corner, so we're going to use a diagonal up right here, and we're going to pick the one that has the dark color here and the transparency there. So once we've done that, we select that, and we have this nice fading background here, which looks good, but you'll see that the borders here are definitely not blending at all because they don't fade really with that corner setting. So we're going to use 2 more text boxes to actually fade those corners out. It's kind of like a Bob Ross-esque blending technique where it's going to fade this as well as the background image into the gray of the background, so that if someone does look at this at a larger screen, it's going to be seamless with how it blends into that background. So add a new text object. Let's go to the layout settings. I don't want rounded corners. I'm going to put a border on it for now because since we're blending from a gray to transparency, it's going to be very easy to lose this object. The whole point of it is for it to be seamless. So we're going to use a border on it while we move it around and change its size and properties. I also want to put this on top. I want this to always be on top of my green transparent object here. So I'll put that on top. And we're going to go to the color settings now. And once again, we're going to do a 2-color gradient. The first color is going to be the color of our default background. And the second color is going to be a transparent color. And so we're going to do this right border first. And with that border, we want it to fade from, showing the image to gray on the right. So we're going to do our transparency vertical. We're going to put the transparent edge on the left and the gray edge on the right. So now I've got this text object that does that fade, and I can place it here in this corner. We make sure we want to get it all the way at the top there to cover that top edge. And then we can pull it down, and it's going to fade that edge pretty seamlessly. We don't want to get that scroll bar in there, so just get it as far as you can. That's probably good enough. Maybe we can push it a little more. From this point, you could control how drastic the fade is by changing the size of this. So if you wanted a less drastic fade, you could really pull this off and it fades more gradually. I'm going to keep it like this for now. It's up to you how you want to do it. Now we're going to copy this object over, resize it to fit in a more horizontal orientation. Let's pull this up. And we're going to change the direction of that fade so that it fades from transparency at the top to the gray at the bottom. And then we're going to pull this down to the corner as far as we can without getting that scroll bar. And pull this all the way across to meet this edge. Once again, you can adjust the size of this if you want to change how it fades, the drasticness of the fade from the color into the gray. Now that we've done that, we can go to our borders and just turn them off. And there you have a nice faded background. It's not necessarily the cleanest thing you could get. If you were using a graphics editor, you could probably clean this up so that it's more smooth. But for what you're doing here, it's probably going to be acceptable for a QlikView application background. So now that we have this, we can just take a screenshot of it. I use this screen, I think it's called Screen Grab or something like that to do this, because it has this nice little pixel viewer there. Oh, I guess I messed that up. One more time. So I'll drag down. The important part here about getting the screenshot is you want to make sure that you get that gray, where it's faded close to or exactly at that gray. So ending there should be good. We'll save this as modified background. So now I can create a new page, and I can go to my sheet settings and change the image to be that modified background, put it in the top left corner with no stretching. And I have a nice faded image to build a dashboard on top of, which is great. So now I'm going to show you how to build that dashboard with those, how to add those shadow type objects. So first let's build a background image. So we're just going to use white for our dashboard. I'm going to take the rounded corners off, and this is the part where I wanted to have these advanced settings, and you may be able to do it without the advanced settings, I'm not positive, but I want a soft shadow, but I don't want any borders really. So I'm going to turn the border width off, but put a soft shadow, which will make the text box appear to float over the screen background. And I'm going to place this up here in the corner, and you can leave a margin or you can put it right in the corner. So I'm going to stretch this out, and maybe I want my dashboard to be something like this size. So there we go, a nice background image for the dashboard as well as a background for the whole template. And now the last piece is to add some shadows to create a header bar and a sidebar for filters, which we can also do with text objects. So I'll create a new text object, and I'm going to go to the color settings once again. This time I'm going to use a one color gradient, and this is really just possible because I'm using white, and so it's easier to do that way. So with the one color gradient, you really control the gradient darkness with this brightness meter, and so all the way down it just completely puts it to black, and at there it puts it completely to white. In this case it's white on white, so it's not really much of a gradient. But I'm just going to do a slight gradient here, and so I'm doing the header first. I'm going to start with a shadow at the bottom and then fading into white. Make sure I don't have corners on that object. Create that. And then to create that shadow effect from this, all you really need to do is just squeeze this gradient up. If I squeeze that, let's go back into layout settings, make sure we put it on top of our image here. Ultimately, what we can do then is grab a screenshot from that final product to have a template for every single page. So I can drag this across, and now I have a shadow bar for my header. And I can, modify the darkness of that. If that's too dark, I can either change that brightness setting, or I can actually just mess with the transparency setting as well and soften that. The direction of the gradient does matter. When the gradient is in this direction, it really appears that the header is below the bottom page. But if we switch the direction of the gradient, we can make it appear that the header is floating above the gradient. The second piece then is just to create one for the filters. Just simple enough. We'll copy this object. It's the same idea, except that instead of a horizontal gradient, we're going to do a vertical gradient. And we're going to have the filters apply a shadow on the main page. So I'm going to go from white to the shadow, to the gray. And then we resize this object. And move it into place. And I actually did that the wrong way, didn't I? To pick the shadow, it should be this way. So I put the gradient that way, and I can resize this guy. And now I've got a little filters page that's applying a light shadow onto that page. So there you go. That's how you can use QlikView to make this template and make these different kinds of shadows, similar to what you'd see on QlikView's demo website.